Where's all the students? Should be coming this time. You're over there? Is this normally where it is, or am I changing it? No, it's better like that. Yeah, like that. That's good. Yeah, that's better. Good. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Wassalatu wassalam ala Sayyidina Muhammadan wa alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. This lecture is about a very important concept in our religion, and that is the teaching or the concept of Al-Wasaṭīyya. Al-Wasaṭīyya. And what Wasaṭīyya means is moderation, balance, or equilibrium. And the word Wasaṭīyya comes from another word, wasat. And wasat is the middle of something, the center. And Allah in the Quran uses this word wasat in the Quran. It's a very interesting use of words, that He uses this word in the Quran to describe the Muslim nation, the Muslim ummah. Allah says, وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا, is that we have made you ummah that is wasat. And there's a lot of discussion about what this means to be ummah that is wasat, but you could translate it as a just community, that you will be witnesses over people and the messenger will be a witness over you. That's one meaning, is a just community. But another meaning of wasat, and this shows you the nature of the Arabic language, that many of the connotations of the words are embedded in the word itself. So another meaning of wasat is the best of something. When the Arabs, they say, give me the wasat of it, whatever they're referring to, it means give me the best of it. Likewise, the Arabs would say that so and so is awsatuna in lineage, means that he is the most noble and he has the best of lineage among us. So one of the meanings of جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا is that we have made you the best of nations by the fact that you are the upright and just, most just of nations. But again, in this word wasat, you can see that it carries a positive connotation. And it tells you that wasat, the moderation, the balance, is always something that is good, whereas the extremes of shortcomings and excess are always something that is blameworthy. And this is embedded in the word itself. Imam Al-Tabari, he says in his tafsir of this verse, he says that we are ummah wasata because we did not fall short like the previous Jewish nation, that they went to extremes, even killing their prophets, as mentioned in the Quran in certain instances. And we did not go to the excess like the Christian nation, in that they claimed divinity for their prophet. So we didn't fall short with our messenger and our religion, and we also didn't go to those excesses like other communities went into those excesses. But furthermore, I want to look at this idea of wasaṭīyya as something much deeper and something much broader and something much more encompassing than simply a good trait or a virtue. I want to look at it from the perspective that this wasaṭīyya, this balance, this moderation, it is actually an overarching principle that permeates everything in our religion and everything in our religious lives. So we shouldn't see wasaṭīyya or this idea as something that is separate or something that is just one virtue from among many virtues. Rather, we should see it as something that is, if you will, a core virtue that enters into every other aspect of the believer's lives. And we'll look at this in a little bit more detail. And also, being that this wasaṭīyya, this balance, this moderation is a core virtue, it's needed in everything. So balance and equilibrium is necessary. It's a necessary ingredient, if you will, to holistic health for human beings in every aspect, whether that's physical health or mental health or spiritual health. Any aspect of human health, balance is a necessary, or religious health, balance is that necessary ingredient. And even from a physical perspective, there was a 12-year study that showed that being able to stand on one foot for 10 seconds, it's not causation, it's correlation, but being able to stand on one foot for 10 seconds indicates that that person is healthier than otherwise. And the study says at the end of the study, the data linked that inability to balance to nearly double the risk of death for any cause within the following 10 years. Right? So even physically speaking, it's not causation. It doesn't mean if you can't balance, you're going to die in 10 years. But it's correlation. It's a correlation that even physically speaking, if people can't balance themselves, then they're more likely to be unwell. So if that's the physical aspect of it, then what about the deeper implications? And if you look that Allah says in one of the most mystic verses of the Quran, that Allahu nuru samawati wal ard, is that Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth. And then Allah goes on to describe this light, where He says, the origin of this light is la sharqiyyatin wa la gharbiyya. It's neither to the east nor to the west. And if you look at wasaṭīyya with regards to the straight path, that's exactly what the straight path is. Because there's two ways that people can deviate from the straight path. Again, either they go in excess or they fall short. They either go in excessiveness or they, due to being lackadaisical, they fall short. And in a beautiful hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he gave a metaphor for the straight path. And he said that Allah has placed down the straight path. On the two sides of the path are two gates which have open doors. The doors have curtains covering them. At the entrance of the path is a caller proclaiming, saying, "Mankind, enter the path collectively and make no divisions in it." Above the path is another caller that whenever someone advances to open one of the doors, he says, "Woe to you, do not open it, for if you open it, you will soon enter it." And then the Prophet, he explained this metaphor, and he said that the path is Islam. The two gates are the limits set by Allah, His prohibitions, that you don't cross those boundaries. The open doors are the prohibitions of Allah. The caller at the head of the path is the book of Allah, and the caller above is the admonishment of Allah that is in the heart of every Muslim. So some of these meanings of Allah declaring that the ummah is a ummah wasata is, as Imam al-Tabari mentioned, is with our religious practice, within our religion. And the Prophet ﷺ told us is that beware of going to extremes in religion itself. For those who came before you were destroyed because of going to extremes in religion. That is one aspect of this wasaṭīyya. Another aspect of wasaṭīyya and how it permeates every aspect is the balance or the balancing act between the the dunya, the world, and the next world. And there's a saying, some say it's a hadith, but it's more likely a word of wisdom, where somebody said that, beware, he said that work for the worldly life as if you're going to live forever. So take your time in doing the things that you need to do for your worldly life. However, work for the akhirah as if you are going to die tomorrow. If somebody knew that they're going to die tomorrow, right, how much would they work towards the akhirah? So a balance between the worldly activities and the worldly affairs and preparing for the akhirah. And this is one of the features of our deen, is that it doesn't negate somebody to be involved in things that are of the world, right? Seeking a halal, a lawful, a good source of income is something that is virtuous and something that is encouraged, and there's no extreme in that. Whereas other traditions might say, no, that's extreme. You have to completely shun the world and shun all the vices of the flesh and all the things that pertain to yourself. That's an extreme, but Islam finds that balance between this world and the next. Another aspect of Al-Wasaṭīyya, al-Wasata, of balance, is in our conception of Allah, our creed. And there's a balance between what's called transcendence and eminence. Is that transcendence, is that the belief that Allah is beyond His creation, outside of His creation. And if somebody goes into an extreme of transcendence, then there's no more personal relationship with their Lord, right? And eminence is the opposite, is that Allah is so close and He's inside the creation, and that if somebody goes to extremes in that, then it can be anthropomorphic. It can lead to other problems, right? But we have the solution to this, is that it's the perfect balance between transcendence, Allah, and eminence, the Rabb, the Lord. Another example of this wasaṭīyya is how we practice the religion, joining between the script of the law and the spirit of the law. And other nations, they made mistakes, right? They went to a very strict implementation of the script of the law, and they forgot the spirit of the law. Whereas, and then the other extreme is those who negated the script of the law and said what's only important is the spirit of the law. Whereas the deen came to join between, in a balanced manner, the script of the law and the spirit of the law. Another manifestation of this wasaṭīyya, again, Allah made this ummatan wasata. Another manifestation of this wasaṭīyya is in good character. And all ethics and virtues and good character is the middle path between two extremes. All good character is the middle path between two extremes. So if you take courage is the middle path between cowardice, that's a deficiency, and recklessness, and that's an excess. So what it means to be courageous is between the two. If you take generosity is the middle path between stinginess, that's a deficiency, and extravagance, that's excess. If you take modesty is the middle path between shamelessness, deficiency, and excessive shyness, and that's an excess. Humility is the middle path between arrogance, deficiency, and self-deprecation, and excess. Forgiveness is the middle path between holding grudges, deficiency, and overlooking harm without accountability, excess. Optimism is the middle path between pessimism, deficiency, and naive hopes, excess, and so on and so forth. And if you look and if you study the traits of virtue, you'll find that true virtue is the golden means. It's almost the middle path between excess and deficiency. And then as Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah is that the balance between loving the Ahlul Bayt, the Prophet ﷺ's family, and loving the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. And there are people that fell into excess and deficiencies in this. There's people that they loved the Prophet's family to such a degree that they spoke disparagingly about the companions. Right? And then there's others that will say things about Ahlul Bayt, the Prophet's family, that are not acceptable and that are not bad. They would say things that are not acceptable, not right. And then finally, if you look at all these concepts, is that they all crystallize in the Prophet ﷺ's sunnah. So the Prophet ﷺ, he is the ultimate example of this wasaṭīyya, of this balance, of this moderation, of this equilibrium. And you can study the Prophet ﷺ from this lens. You could read the hadith, you could read the shama'il from this lens of seeing how he had that perfect balance. And really, the difficult thing is to be balanced, right? It's actually easier to be extreme. It's actually easier to be extreme because you let yourself go and you do whatever you want. But to be balanced is actually more difficult. And the Prophet ﷺ, that's why his path is the higher path. It's higher even than the path of monks and people that separate themselves from the world, because his path is the path of the balance. And that straight path, again, is a path that has to be with moderation, with balance. And the Prophet ﷺ is that human being that achieved this to the degree of perfection. And they mentioned that even the Prophet ﷺ, even his physical traits, the shape of his head and his hands and his body, even that was in perfect proportion. So he was balanced even in his physical nature. And Imam Al-Ghazali, in his genius, when he wrote the Ihya Ulumuddin, which consists of 40 books, he put the book of prophetic characteristics right in the middle. It was book 20. To show you that everything before and everything after culminates in the center. It culminates with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the Prophet sallallahu, he showed us this wasaṭīyya, this moderation in worship. When the companions, some of the companions, they made a vow to fast continuously and to pray all night and to never get married, the Prophet ﷺ, he corrected them. And he asked them, is this true? And they said, yes. And he says, by Allah, I fear Allah more than any of you, yet I fast and break my fast, I pray and I sleep and I marry. And whoever turns away from my sunnah, the sunnah of balance, of moderation, is not from me. And in the narration, he said that, don't do that. He said, fast sometimes and don't fast other times. Stand up for prayer at some times and sleep a portion of the night. And he said, your body has a right over you, your eyes has a right over you, and your wife has a right over you. The Prophet ﷺ, he showed us this moderation in dealing with others. In a beautiful hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said that, love whoever you love mildly. Love whoever you love with temperance. Why? Because perhaps one day he will be the most hateful of people to you. Perhaps one day you might have a follow-up with that person, and if you go to extremes, it backlashes. And the Prophet said, hate whoever you hate mildly, because you don't know, perhaps that person will become beloved to you someday. But if you go to extremes and you burn all your bridges, you can never make amends, right? And even in enmity, Allah tells us, do not let the hatred of people prevent you from being just. Be just, for that is nearer to righteousness. Even in enmity, your enemy, you have to be balanced. In family life, is that the Prophet ﷺ, look at the balance, is that he would serve his family, but when the time for prayer came, he would get up and proceed to the masjid immediately. In speech, the Prophet ﷺ told us, whoever believes in Allah on the last day should speak good or remain silent. Even in food and drink, the Prophet ﷺ told us that the son of Adam does not fill any vessel worse than that of his stomach. It is sufficient for him to eat a few mouthfuls to keep his back straight. If he must, then 1/3 for food, 1/3 for drink, 1/3 for air. So this, again, the wasaṭīyya, the balance, the equilibrium, the moderation, it permeates and it informs and it enters into all aspects of this religion and our practice of the religion. And if we want to implement this religion in a way that is closer to the sunnah, we have to be able to navigate accordingly and to find that moderation, that balanced path. right? And not go to excesses of either shortcomings or extremes, and we don't submit to those excesses because those are easier to rely upon and to be pulled towards. But it's actually a lot harder, and it's a lot more virtuous and more important to find that perfect balance. Lastly, there's one expression of balance that our teachers call us to in implementing the religion in this day and age, and that is, as you know, that is referred to as the Maqasid al-Thalatha, the three principles, the three objectives, and they are knowledge, devotion, and service. And what we are called to do is to balance between these three. And this is, if you will, a way that we can implement the sunnah, is balancing between the knowledge, ilm, devotion, suluk, and da'wah. And many of the problems that you might see is because, again, of an imbalance between these three. An example of that is you might have a scholar that is only a scholar of the outward and is only focused on outward things, and they're missing the spirit of the law. They have an imbalance with devotion. And then another extreme is you might have somebody that is deeply devout and spiritual to the degree that they dismiss the outward aspect, they dismiss the sharia, they dismiss the legal rulings, and that is another extreme, and that comes with its own problems. And then another example of imbalance is somebody that is so involved in service that they forget the principles that they need from knowledge, right, and from devotion. So what we have to call ourselves towards is finding on a daily basis, having these portions, finding time for these portions of joining between knowledge, right, devotion, and da'wah and service. And if we do that, that is an attempt on our side, individually, to find the balance that we need to be healthy. And it goes without saying that we live in a world of extreme imbalance. We live in a world of extreme imbalance. In fact, one of the signs, the overarching signs of the Day of Judgment is that everything is out of order. Everything is reversed. Everything is inverted. Right? Everything is inverted. The good appears to be bad, and the bad appears to be good. And everything is there's no balance, there's no equilibrium anymore. But the way that we counter the signs of the end of time and the trends of the end of time is by finding that balance. And that's the responsibility, and that's the job of each and every one of us, is to live Islam in a way that is wasaṭīyya, right? And Allah tells us that we are the ummatan wasata. So we have to seek, and we have to strive towards that objective of representing on an individual basis the ummah wasata. And when somebody sees you, they have to see that wasaṭīyya. They have to see that equilibrium, that perfect balance, that straight path. So we ask Allah that He enable us to be fully wasaṭīyya, fully characterized with this beautiful attribute of wasaṭīyya, and that we're enabled to follow the sunnah in a way that is loyal to the sunnah, and that we follow the Prophet's perfect footsteps on the straight path that leads to paradise. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. If anybody has any